Have you ever felt like you are carrying the weight of the entire world on your shoulders? In those quiet, lonely moments when the noise of the day finally fades, our minds often grow incredibly loud. The heavy uncertainty of tomorrow, the lingering sting of past mistakes, or simply the exhausting pressure of trying to hold everything together can leave you feeling completely drained. We all navigate seasons of hardship where anxiety feels like a thick fog that refuses to lift. But what if true peace isn't found by escaping the storm, but by learning how to stand completely still within it? Today, we are going to explore gentle, profound Buddhist teachings that offer a clear path back to your center. Take a deep breath. You are safe here. Let's begin. Part 1. The story of the muddy water. Many years ago, there was a young man who carried a heavy and invisible weight. Much like many of us today, his mind was an endless storm of worries. He spent his days constantly replaying past mistakes and anxiously trying to predict a future he could not control. The demands of his daily life, the expectations of others, and his own harsh self-judgments had left him feeling completely exhausted and overwhelmed. Desperate for a solution, for some secret formula to instantly erase his anxiety and bring him peace, he decided to journey into the mountains to seek out a wise, elderly Zen master who lived quietly in a remote temple. When the young man finally arrived at the temple gates, he was practically vibrating with nervous energy. He found the Zen master sweeping the stone courtyard, his movements slow, deliberate, and perfectly at peace. The young man rushed over and poured out his heart. He spoke rapidly, his words stumbling over one another as he listed every fear, every frustration, and every chaotic thought that had been keeping him awake at night. "My mind is an absolute mess," the young man confessed, his voice trembling with exhaustion. "I can't stop thinking. I can't find a single moment of peace. Please, you are a wise teacher. You have to tell me how to fix this. How do I force my mind to be quiet?" The Zen master stopped sweeping. He looked at the young man with eyes full of deep, unwavering compassion. He didn't offer a long lecture, nor did he hand over a list of complicated rules to follow. Instead, he simply smiled gently and gestured for the young man to follow him. They walked in silence down a narrow, winding dirt path until they reached a small, gently flowing stream. Because of recent heavy rain, the water rushing through the creek was turbulent and brown, entirely clouded by churned-up dirt and debris. The Zen master knelt by the edge of the water, took an empty glass cup from his robe, and scooped up the muddy water. He then walked back to a wooden bench under a large tree, placed the glass carefully on the flat surface, and sat down. "Sit with me," the master softly instructed. The young man sat down, staring intently at the glass. The water inside was thick, dark, and murky. Dirt swirled around in chaotic little tornadoes within the confines of the glass. "What is this?" the young man asked, his frustration beginning to bubble up again. "I came to you for spiritual guidance, to learn how to fix my broken life, and you are simply showing me a cup of dirty water." The master raised a single finger to his lips, signaling for quiet. "Just watch," he whispered. And so, they sat. For the first few minutes, the young man was deeply agitated. He wanted to shake the glass, to pour the water through a filter, to do something to fix the problem immediately. But the master simply sat beside him, breathing deeply, completely unbothered by the mess inside the cup. Slowly, as the minutes passed, something beautiful began to happen. Because the glass was left entirely alone, untouched and undisturbed, the heavy particles of dirt and mud began to sink. The tiny grains of sand floated downward, settling quietly at the very bottom of the glass. As the heavy debris fell away, the water at the top began to clear. Given enough time and stillness, what was once a chaotic, murky mess had transformed. The water was now crystal clear, perfectly transparent, with all the mud resting harmlessly at the bottom. The Zen master finally turned to the young man. "Your mind," he said gently, "is exactly like this water. When you are stressed, when you are carrying the weight of the world, your mind becomes turbulent and clouded with muddy thoughts. You cannot see clearly. But look at how you try to fix it. When your mind is muddy, you panic. You try to force it to be clear. You argue with your thoughts, you resist your feelings, and you desperately try to control the situation. But fighting your mind is like shaking this glass. The more you agitate it, the muddier it becomes." The master gently tapped the clear glass. The only way to clarify muddy water is to leave it alone. To let it sit. To give it the time and the stillness it needs for the dirt to settle on its own. You do not have to fight your anxiety, my friend. You do not have to wrestle your worries into submission. When the heavy thoughts arise, simply step back. Observe them without immediately reacting. Allow them to exist, and give them the space to settle. This gentle teaching is a profound reminder for us, especially when we are navigating the hardest chapters of our lives. We are conditioned to believe that every problem requires an immediate reaction. If we feel anxious, we think we must instantly find a way to stop it. If a sudden challenge appears, we feel the burning urge to respond right away. But reacting to every single disturbance only keeps the mud swirling in our minds. Not everything deserves your reaction. Not every anxious thought requires you to go to war. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is absolutely nothing. When you feel the panic rising, when the future feels too blurry to navigate, remember the glass of muddy water. Pause. Take a deep, conscious breath. Step back from the edge of your own turbulent thoughts. Allow the mental dirt to slowly drift to the bottom. In that beautiful, intentional stillness, your natural clarity will always return. Part 2, You are the sky, not the weather. Once we understand how to let the muddy water of our minds settle, a profound realization begins to surface. In the quiet space that follows, we start to notice our thoughts not as absolute truths, but simply as passing events. In Buddhist teachings, there is a very famous and incredibly accurate description of the human mind. It is often referred to as the monkey mind. I want you to imagine a wild monkey in a dense jungle. It is constantly swinging from one branch to another, never resting, continuously chattering, grasping at a piece of fruit only to throw it away a second later and reach for another. Our minds behave exactly like this wild monkey. It swings endlessly from a branch of past regret to a branch of future anxiety. It chatters loudly, constantly making up stories, running through endless, what-if, scenarios, and predicting disasters that haven't even happened. During hard times, when we are feeling vulnerable or lost, this monkey mind becomes exceptionally loud and deeply convincing. It feeds on our insecurities. It whispers heavy, terrifying things into your ear. You are never going to make it out of this. You are not strong enough. Everything is falling apart, and it is all your fault. Because these thoughts echo so loudly within our own heads, we naturally assume they must be true. We believe the stories our monkey mind tells us, and we let them dictate our reality. But here is one of the most liberating truths you will ever learn on your spiritual journey. Just because you think something, does not mean it is real. Thoughts are not facts. They are simply mental habits. They are patterns that your brain has repeated over time, often rooted in old fears, past traumas, or a biological instinct to protect you from danger. But they are not the ultimate truth of who you are. To truly embrace this, Buddhism invites us to look up at the vast, endless sky. Imagine the sky above you right now. It is boundless, infinite, and eternally peaceful. Throughout the day and throughout the seasons, different weather patterns move across it. Sometimes, the sky is filled with light, fluffy, beautiful white clouds. These are your moments of joy, your happy memories, your fleeting moments of peace. But sometimes, dark, heavy, ominous storm clouds roll in. There might be roaring thunder, fierce winds, and pouring rain. These are your periods of deep grief, your intense anxiety, your anger, and your fear. Now, ask yourself this: no matter how violent the storm becomes, no matter how loud the thunder crashes or how hard the rain falls, is the sky itself ever damaged? Does the storm tear the sky apart? Does the heavy rain wash away the deep blue behind the clouds? No. Never. The sky simply holds the weather. It allows the storm to arrive, it gives it space to rain down, and it watches as the winds eventually blow the dark clouds away. Because it knows that storms are temporary, but the sky is permanent. After every single storm in the history of the world, the vast, clear blue sky remains exactly as it always was, untouched, unbroken, and perfectly whole. My friend, you are the sky. Your thoughts, your worries, your anxieties, and your fears, they are simply the weather. When you are going through a particularly painful chapter in your life, it is so easy to forget this. You identify so closely with your heavy thoughts that you begin to believe you are the storm. You feel completely swallowed by the dark clouds. But Buddhist mindfulness teaches us to step back and remember our true nature. You are not the fearful thought, you are the silent, spacious awareness that is observing the fearful thought. So, how do we practice this in our daily lives? We do it by shifting from being a believer in our thoughts to an observer of them. The next time a heavy, anxious thought enters your mind, do not fight it. Remember the glass of muddy water. Instead of panicking, take a deep, grounding breath. Mentally take a step back and simply watch the thought float into your awareness. You can even gently label it. Say to yourself, there is a worried thought passing by, or I see a dark cloud of fear right now. By simply naming it, you detach from it. You strip away its power over you. You realize that you do not have to invite every passing thought in for tea. You do not have to follow the monkey onto every dark branch. You can simply let the weather be the weather, knowing that you are the vast, unshakable sky behind it. The storm will pass, as all storms do, but your inner stillness remains forever. Before we continue, if these gentle words have brought a moment of stillness to your day, please consider subscribing to Buddha Coha and giving this video a mindful like. Your quiet support helps our sanctuary grow, allowing these healing teachings to reach other beautiful souls who might be navigating their own storms. Now, let us take a deep breath together, and return to our path. Part 3, Anchoring in the Now. Once we realize that we are the sky and not the passing storm clouds, we must ask ourselves a very important question. Why do these dark clouds of worry gather in the first place? Why do we suffer so deeply in our own minds? If you look closely at your anxiety, if you truly examine the thoughts that keep you awake at 2 in the morning, you will notice a fascinating pattern. Almost none of your worries are about what is happening in this exact, precise moment. Instead, they are almost entirely focused on a time that does not even exist. We worry because we are constant time travelers. We leave the safety of the present moment and project our minds far into the unknown future. We play a dangerous, exhausting game of what if. What if I lose my job? What if this relationship fails? What if my health declines? What if I am not strong enough to handle what comes next? When we are going through hard times, our minds act like a movie director, constantly writing and producing the most tragic, terrifying scripts imaginable. And here is the truly incredible part: our physical bodies do not know the difference between a real event and a vividly imagined one. When you sit in a perfectly safe room and imagine a terrible future scenario, your heart begins to race, your palms sweat, and your chest tightens. You experience the stress, the grief, and the panic of a tragedy that has not actually happened. You are essentially paying interest on a debt you may never even owe. Buddhism offers a very simple, yet deeply profound truth to cure this habit: the future is an illusion. It is a ghost. It is a blank canvas onto which your fear is painting terrifying monsters. The only thing that is undeniably real, the only place where life actually happens, is right here. Right now. Think of a massive ship out on the open ocean. When a violent storm rolls in, the waves swell, and the winds howl, threatening to throw the ship violently off course or crash it against the rocks. What does the captain do? He doesn't try to negotiate with the wind. He doesn't try to physically fight the towering waves. He does the only thing that will keep the ship safe: he drops a heavy iron anchor deep into the ocean floor. The storm may still rage around the ship, the rain may still pour, but the ship remains grounded. It stays exactly where it is supposed to be until the weather clears. When the storm of anxiety hits your mind, when you find yourself being swept away by the terrifying waves of what if, you must learn to drop your anchor. You must return to the only safe harbor you have, the present moment. But how do we do this? What is our anchor? It is something you carry with you every single second of your life. It is your breath. Your breath is the ultimate anchor because it can only exist in the present. You cannot breathe in the past, that air is already gone. You cannot breathe in the future, that air is not yet here. You can only ever take a breath right now. The next time you feel the panic rising, I invite you to try this gentle practice. Stop whatever you are doing. Close your eyes if you can, and place your hand over your heart. Feel the physical sensation of your chest rising and falling. Listen to the soft sound of the air entering and leaving your body. Inhale deeply, imagining you are pulling the heavy iron anchor down into the sand. Exhale slowly, releasing the tension in your shoulders. As you sit there, anchored in your breath, ask yourself one simple question: in this exact second, right here, right now, am I okay? Don't think about tomorrow. Don't think about 5 minutes from now. Just look at this very second. You are sitting. You are breathing. Your heart is beating. In this tiny fraction of time, there is no crisis. There is no disaster. In this exact moment, you are safe. You are alive. By continuously bringing your attention back to the present, back to your breath, you starve your anxiety. You stop feeding the future with your energy. You cannot control what will happen next week or next year, but you can control where you place your focus today. The present moment is the safest place you will ever be. It is the quiet sanctuary where your peace has been waiting for you all along. Part 4: The Illusion of Control. Now that we have learned to drop our anchor in the safety of the present moment, we begin to uncover the hidden root of so much of our exhaustion. Why are we so terrified of the future in the first place? Why does the monkey mind swing so frantically from one disaster scenario to another? If we are entirely honest with ourselves, the answer is simple: it is because we are desperately trying to control the uncontrollable. One of the most agonizing sources of human suffering, especially during difficult chapters of our lives, is our fierce, unrelenting desire to manage every single detail of our existence. We want our plans to unfold perfectly. We want the people we love to act exactly as we expect them to. We want our hard work to guarantee absolute success, and we want to build an impenetrable fortress around our lives that keeps pain, loss, and uncertainty locked firmly outside. But life, in its infinite and wild wisdom, rarely listens to our rigid plans. The weather changes without warning. People we deeply trust may disappoint us. Economies shift, illnesses arrive uninvited, and situations we thought were completely secure suddenly fall apart. When these unexpected things happen, when the universe does not bend to our will, we feel utterly helpless. We feel angry. We feel scared. We feel as though we have failed. Buddhism offers a profoundly healing, life-changing truth about this struggle. Attempting to control the external world is a guaranteed recipe for suffering. Why? Because absolute control is an illusion. Imagine standing on a beautiful, sunlit beach and scooping up a handful of dry, fine sand. If you hold your hand open, with your palm relaxed and flat, the sand rests there peacefully. It stays exactly where it is. But the moment you become anxious about losing the sand, the moment you try to trap it by squeezing your hand into a tight fist, what happens? The sand immediately begins to slip through the cracks of your fingers. The harder you squeeze, the more desperate your grip becomes, the faster the sand vanishes. Eventually, you are left with an empty, aching hand. Our illusion of control works the same way. The tighter we try to grip our lives, the more we try to force outcomes and manipulate circumstances, the more our peace slips through our fingers. True, lasting peace does not come from successfully controlling the outside world. It comes from mastering your inside world. You see, existence is like a vast, flowing river. Most of us spend our lives standing in the middle of this rushing river, exhausting ourselves by trying to push the water back with our bare hands. We fight the current. We fight reality. And we slowly drown in our own resistance. But the wise practitioner, the one who seeks true tranquility, does not fight the river. They learn to build a boat. They learn to navigate the waters gracefully, trusting that the current knows exactly where it is going. Surrendering control does not mean you become passive. It does not mean you give up on your dreams, stop caring about your loved ones, or stop trying to improve your life. It simply means you shift your precious energy away from forcing outcomes, and instead, you pour that beautiful energy into the only space where you actually have power, your own response. Here is what you can always control. You can control your breath. You can control your mindset. You can control the healthy boundaries you set. You can control your effort, your compassion, and the pure intention behind your actions. You cannot stop a heavy storm from rolling into your life, but you can absolutely choose to stand calmly in the rain. You cannot stop other people from saying hurtful, unkind things, but you can choose whether or not you let their toxic words take root in your heart. You cannot guarantee that you will never fail, but you can give your absolute best, stay fully present, and gracefully let go of the outcome. In Buddhist practice, this profound state of balance is known as equanimity. It is a peaceful, steady mind that remains deeply anchored even when the world around it is chaotic and unpredictable. It is the quiet, unshakable confidence of knowing that no matter what the universe hands you today, you have the internal tools to handle it. So, the next time your heart feels heavy and completely overwhelmed with worry, gently remind yourself of the open palm. Whisper to your own anxious mind, I do not need to control the entire world. I only need to control how I respond to it. That is where your true strength lives. That is where the heavy burden of worry finally begins to fade, leaving you light, free, and deeply at peace. Part 5. The lotus needs the mud. As we learn to surrender our desperate need for control and anchor ourselves in the present moment, a beautiful, yet challenging, question often arises. What do we do with the pain of the past? What happens when we look back at the chapters of our lives that were filled with genuine heartbreak, crushing disappointment, or profound failure? It is so incredibly natural to look at those dark periods and wish they had never happened. When you were at your absolute lowest, feeling broken, entirely alone, and unsure if you would ever recover, you probably viewed that suffering as a punishment. You may have asked the universe, why is this happening to me? But Buddhism offers a radically different, deeply healing perspective on our pain. To understand this, we must look at one of the most sacred and revered symbols in the Buddhist tradition, the majestic lotus flower. If you have ever seen a lotus in bloom, you know that it is breathtakingly beautiful. Its petals are pure, pristine, and radiate a quiet, elegant peace. But where does this magnificent flower grow? It does not grow in clear, sparkling, purified water. It does not grow in pristine mountain springs. The lotus only grows in the dark, heavy, murky, and foul-smelling mud at the very bottom of a stagnant pond. Imagine the seed of the lotus, buried deep in that thick, heavy darkness. It is surrounded by dirt, decay, and shadow. It feels the crushing weight of the water pressing down on it. From the perspective of the seed, the mud must feel like a prison. It must feel like the end. But the seed does not reject the mud. It does not fight the darkness. Instead, it absorbs the nutrients hidden within that very decay. It uses the heavy, dirty mud to fuel its own growth. It pushes upward, slowly and patiently, through the murky water, until it finally breaks the surface and blossoms into a stunning flower under the warmth of the sun. A famous Zen saying is, "No mud, no lotus." My friend, your worst days, your deepest grief, your heaviest anxieties, and your most painful failures, they are your mud. When you were walking through the darkest seasons of your life, the weight of the world felt like it was crushing you. You may have wanted to run away, to hide, or to give up entirely. But without that pressure, without that deeply uncomfortable soil, you could never have sprouted. Those painful moments were absolutely not wasted. They were the very bricks that built your resilience. They were the intense training ground for your spirit. Think about it carefully. Your hardest days taught you humility, because you learned that you cannot control everything. They taught you patience because you learned that true healing never happens overnight. And most importantly, they taught you profound compassion. Because you now know exactly what it feels like to hurt, you can recognize that same pain in the eyes of a stranger. You can extend genuine kindness to others who are suffering. In the Buddhist tradition, this deep, unshakable compassion is the very heart of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. They do not turn away from the suffering of the world, they understand that true awakening is found right in the middle of it. This brings us to a life-changing practice, reframing the problem as a path. When you are in the midst of a crisis, it feels like a massive wall blocking your journey. It feels like a dead end. But what if it is actually a door? What if the universe is using this exact challenge to guide you toward a deeper wisdom you could not have reached any other way? Buddhism calls this process, turning poison into medicine. An obstacle is only a roadblock if you refuse to learn from it. When a relationship ends, instead of seeing it as a devastating failure, you can gently ask yourself, What is this teaching me about my own self-worth and my boundaries? When a career path falls apart, you can ask, what hidden talents am I now being forced to discover? By reframing your struggles, you transform the heavy energy of fear into a powerful curiosity. You stop being a passive victim of your circumstances and become an active participant in your own spiritual awakening. You realize that every single difficulty you have ever faced was simply an invitation to grow. So, the next time you are tempted to despise your past or panic about your current struggles, remember the lotus. Bow gracefully to your own history. Embrace the harsh lessons. Do not hate the mud that dirtied your hands, because that exact mud is what gave you the strength to bloom. You are beautifully, perfectly equipped to handle whatever comes next, because the hardest things you have ever survived have already built the foundation of your inner peace. As we come to the close of our time together today, I want to invite you to take one final, deep, conscious breath. Inhale the quiet stillness of this exact moment, and as you exhale, release any lingering tension you might still be holding in your shoulders or your jaw. Let it all go. Remember, my friend, that true peace is not a distant destination you have to fiercely chase. It is not something you have to travel across the world to find, nor is it a rare prize awarded only to those who have completely perfect, problem-free lives. Peace is simply a quiet, sacred place inside of you that never actually leaves. It was only temporarily forgotten underneath the noisy, swirling storms of the monkey mind. Whenever your life feels too heavy to carry, whenever the future seems completely blurry, and your heart aches with worry, return to these gentle teachings. Let the muddy water of your mind settle naturally. Remember that you are the vast, unbroken blue sky, completely unharmed by the passing weather. Drop your anchor deeply into the safety of the present moment, gracefully release your exhausting grip on the illusion of control, and trust that the dark mud you are standing in today is exactly what will help your beautiful lotus bloom tomorrow. You have already survived 100% of your hardest days. You are far stronger, far wiser, and far more resilient than your anxiety wants you to believe. Thank you so deeply for sharing your precious time, your open heart, and your beautiful energy with us today here at Buddha Coha. If these gentle words brought you a moment of comfort or a sense of peace, please consider leaving a comment below to share your journey with our community. Subscribe to Buddha Coha, and like this video so that this healing message can reach other beautiful souls who might be wandering in the storm. Until we meet again, may you walk gently, may you breathe deeply, and may you find unshakable peace in the present moment.